we have developed this experience throughout the years. And using this as a case study, as an example today, I would like to deepen the discussion on some of the concepts, some of the shortcomings as well, some of the positive aspects of putting remote participation in place. So I think you can hear me well, everybody. I don't see any complaints in the chat. So I think we can carry on and start our session. So as a start, I would like us to focus a little bit on the concept of eParticipation, which is the key concept of the title of the presentation. eParticipation, to put it very roughly, means that someone who is not physically present is able to actively interact and in a real-time way, in an interactive way, through the use of appropriate technology in an international discussion. And of course, when we talk about e-participation in international meetings, we tend to focus on the participation of non-governmental actors, which is an important aspect of it. But I'd like also to call attention of the importance of remote participation, of e-participation, to other actors as well, such as to the participation of policymakers, to the participation of congressmen, and why not to the participation of diplomats that sometimes cannot attend to international meetings in person for several constraints that we will talk about later on. So another aspect, interesting aspect of this concept is that sometimes you will see reference to e-participation or to remote participation. And actually both concepts can be used interchangeably. They are like synonyms in this realm. We tend to prefer the use of e-participation because when we talk about remote participation, it carries some kind of value, a kind of prejudice, let's put it that way, that we that attended the meetings in person, we are the ones that are in the center, in the place where we should be, and you that didn't attend in person, you are in remote locations. And this is not actually true most of the times. If we take the example of the IGF, for instance, the organizers tend to organize the IGF in developing countries, usually not in capitals, in some smaller cities. So most of the times it's not in the center of the world. And if you are in a center or if you are in a remote location, it totally depends on your perspective, on the place that you are based and so on. So we tend to prefer the expression e-participation as a more neutral expression to refer to it. So one first thing that I would like to call attention to is that most of the international organizations had already introduced some kind of a platform for e-participation in their daily routine. If we think about it, many meetings between staff members who are located in different locations or with experts, they are carried out online. And most of the times as well, cooperation between international organizations and international agencies is being very encouraged. And these platforms are used for this kind of communication. So my point is that these platforms, they are already in use in international organizations. Sometimes just a matter of scalability to make them available to other external participants as well. But the fact that they have already been introduced make them no stranger to international organizations. Actually, they are already causing some positive impacts, such as a better information management, more open for communication with external actors, and so on. So sometimes it's just a matter of scaling it to make it available as well for external participants. But let's focus on e-participation per se, that is understood by most of the actors as making remote participation mechanisms available to an external audience, to external people. There are many international organizations that have devised strategies for remote participation, such as UNDP and the International Telecommunication Union, the ITU, the IGF, ICANN, which is an interesting private organization that deals with DNS management on the internet. So there are different strategies, but in general, they combine some elements. such as making information constantly available online as a preparatory process, to webcast the meetings that take place in these organizations, and to put in place some platform to receive feedback, to receive interaction. And we can say in general that when these remote participation mechanisms are created, they increase both transparency and inclusion as well, because they trigger a positive change in behavior. Sometimes people that did not necessarily see themselves as stakeholders in the international processes, as concerned people, when they start to follow the discussions inside the organizations, they realize how much that discussions have an impact on their daily lives. And they start to demand more information, not only for accountability reasons, but because they realize they need to be well informed to be able to offer valuable inputs into the process. So they start to demand more reliable, timely information from organizations. So this creates a kind of a positive feedback loop process here. The more participation channels are available, we increase the demand for information and accountability. On the other hand, when more information is available, we raise awareness of the importance of international processes, and we increase participation of other actors as well. And this is important not only, as I said before, not only for non-governmental actors, but we know that how important it is in international processes that actors such as the policymakers, such as regulators, participate as well. This makes a lot easier to translate international discussions into national policies later on. So another point that we could discuss is that we now face many constraints to participate physically in international meetings. We see that there is a proliferation of organizations and important meetings and so on, when on the other hand, we still live in a severe financial crisis that put us a lot of constraints in budget to be able to participate. E-participation is a way to try to overcome this kind of constraints, not only the financial ones, but the human resources as well. We know that when we come from developing countries or from small countries, sometimes it's difficult to send representatives to these meetings. And e-participation, if put in place with a sound methodology, can make these actors able to be to offer inputs into the process as well, even though they're not able to attend. We should take into account environmental constraints as well, not only the burden of traveling and so on that is very much discussed today, but also environmental constraints such as natural disasters and volcano. I know you remember in 2010, maybe many of you were stranded in airports, unable to fly because of the volcano that came into action in Iceland. And I've just saw on the news today that it's coming into action again. Sometimes we have this facts that we cannot control. And on the occasion, many meetings were canceled, meeting rooms were empty, people were stranded at airports. And sometimes e-participation is a way to overcome this kind of obstacle to participation as well. We have many different options to put remote participation in place, technical options, I mean. We have platforms that will stimulate on-site participation that are very close to on-site interactions, such as telepresence. And I also raised the point of telepresence because this is something that people from the diplomatic activities usually ask about. If you are in a big embassy that usually hold meetings with other embassies or with other diplomats that are abroad, telepresence, although it's an option that it takes some resources to put in place, financial resources, human resources, you need an expert to do it. It's an option that maybe you should consider if you hold meetings on a daily basis, and this is definitely a good option. but it's not the only one available. Sometimes we think that we need this huge financial efforts to put in place remote participation, and this is not always true. We have many kinds of platforms, from the most expensive to the less expensive. Sometimes because the platform is not very expensive or it's free, doesn't mean that it's not effective. We have very good platforms for webcasting and chat interaction that are totally free online. So it's a matter of researching the platforms and try to find out which platform is the best for your needs. But what we have on the market and online for free, many options available that we can choose from. So let's take a look at the example of the Internet Governance Forum, because I think this is a good example to clarify some of the ideas and the concepts that we are discussing here. Sometimes when we are talking on a more conceptual level, it's a little bit difficult to visualize how this could take place actually, and how we can actually put in place a mechanism like this. Does it take a lot of effort? Does it take a lot of money? And it's good that we visualize how it has been done in an international meeting, so we can have a clearer idea of how we can do that as well in our embassies or international meetings. So the example of the IGF is a very interesting one, actually. It's good to give a little bit of background. The second edition of the IGF took place in Brazil in 2007. It was actually when I started to follow the meetings annually. The IGF in Brazil, the Brazilian government, the Ministry of Culture, suggested the IGF Secretariat to put in place an eParticipation mechanism. This was something new in the forum. It has never been done before. And after some negotiation, the Secretariat agreed to put a chat platform where people could send comments and questions to the IGF participants. We were there and we thought, okay, this is a very good idea, but we think we can make it a little bit more interactive and make people feel more close and present in the meeting. So in the year of 2008, a group of people from Diplo, they created a working group on remote participation. And we passed the year of 2008 researching models of remote participation that were put in place in other international organizations, trying to find the best ones and the commonalities, what we could use in the IGF. And by the end of the year in the IGF 2008 that took place in India, we put in place a pilot project using back then a platform that was called Dim. It was a pilot project that worked very well. And why was it so interesting? And it's an interesting case to replicate, I think, in other organizations. Because it was based on the idea of creating hubs to the IGF. What are these hubs? Well, to put it in a brief way, the hubs are local meetings that take place in parallel with the IGF. So some people come together in many cities all over the world. They come together and in small groups watches the webcast from the IGF. They can send their questions. They can be text questions or sometimes video questions as well. We can show the video of the people asking the question in the IGF. And at one time, they would just sometimes stop watching the webcast and they continue the discussion of the same thing from a local perspective. So this creates a positive change of views and opinions among the local actors as well. So it's not just following what is being discussed there, is also translating the topics that are being discussed in the IGF to our local realities. See how we can implement some of the policy options that are being discussed there. So it combines this element of remote participation, remote interaction, and with the element of on-site participation, of network building, of community building in cities all over the world. These are some images of hubs that were organized to the IGF. The first one that you see on the upper left took place in Belgrade, and the second one took place in India. It was a large one in India. they also take place in developed countries. This one now took place in Washington, D.C. It was a very interactive hub. This one took place in Port of Spain, in Trinidad and Tobago. It was a small but very interactive group of people. And the figures show how this idea has been increasing and developing over the years. In 2008, when we started with the pilot project, we had 12 hubs registered to the IGF in 12 different cities around the globe. In 2009, we had 15 hubs. In 2010, 31. In 2011, 47, if I'm not mistaken. And last year, we had 52 hubs in all continents, all over the world. And it's interesting to see that most of these hubs take place in cities from developing countries. So it corroborates this idea that remote participation, e-participation, is a way to overcome this financial constraints that many times actors have to participate. Some of these hubs have been organized through a partnership between, for instance, the Ministry of External Relations and a civil society or an academic organization. So in some of them, the ministry has provided the facilities, I mean the room, the webcast tools, mechanisms, and civil society or the academia has worked on mobilization of actors. So they make sure that the idea is widespread, that people are invited, they create this community building exercise. So it's also interesting to see how the hubs locally has served as a bridge, as a facilitator of the dialogue between different sectors, between governments and civil society and academia, and also companies. There are companies that also give some support, such as the technology or some financial support to local hubs. So it also helps to make bridges, and I think it makes the experience interesting as well. Another interesting aspect is to analyze the impact that they had on participation. This is the breaking of participation in the IGF that took place in Lithuania. That's why you see significant participation from Europe. So most of the time, there is a significant participation from the region where the IGF has been organized. If you take a look at the numbers, you will see that the participation from countries from South America is very low, it's only 5%. The participation from Africa was only 7%. And this is a trend that has proven to be constant throughout the years that the IGF has taken place. Participation from developing regions tends to be considerably lower than the participation of developed regions. And if we take a look at the breakout, if we include the IGF hubs, the breakout of participation, if you take a look at to your left, it completely changes. If you take a look at South America participated with 25% of participants. Africa participated with 30%. So you see that there is a more balanced participation in the meetings when we put the numbers of remote participation of the hubs into this count. So it proves that it's a good way to minimize this financial constraints, to foster participation from developing countries, and ultimately to make the forum more inclusive and more legitimate as well. So it contributes to legitimacy of the forum. So it is something that has been very interesting to the Secretariat and to the forum as well as an institution. Another interesting aspect is the impact that these hubs have had on not only on community development locally, but also on capacity building. I put this message not for you to read it, but for you to get the spirit of it. And this is a message we received from the organizer of a hub in Dhaka, and he mentioned how many actors, different actors, have participated in the hub, and when they were discussing the themes there, many ideas of more formal, more structured way of interaction between them emerged. So they created ISOC chapters they started to organize a national pre-event before the IGF. So now they have a national IGF. So you see how the work of the organization has started to become more grassroots, more embedded in society, more present in different regions around the world. It's not just a meeting that takes place once a year, everybody goes and okay. It's something that it's a process. It's a process that throughout the years happens in the preparatory meetings, in the national IGF, in the organizational hubs, so you create a larger momentum of discussion, and of course, discussions on substance, they become richer as well. I think it's important to talk a little bit about the platform and the setup of remote participation. As I said, in general, there are some components involved, such as the webcast of the meetings. These webcasts, they become archived, so they can be consulted later on, and this is important as well for capacity building for the inclusion of newcomers. Sometimes we are coming for the first time to a meeting, and I know that diplomats know that a lot because they tend to change their positions a lot of time, and sometimes you rely on what your predecessor tells you to talk about the last meeting, what happened, what was discussed. And the archives of the webcast is a way for newcomers to take a look exactly of what happened in the meeting, and it lowers the barriers of entry. It decreases the time that is needed for someone to learn the previous topics and what has been discussed before. So the webcast is an important component. We have aggregated captioning as well. We have a live transcripts of all discussions. And when this was first introduced, it's interesting because we introduced it thinking about people with hearing disabilities. But we realized that it was very important for those that don't speak English as native English. It makes so much easier for them to follow what is being discussed if they can aggregate the audio with the captioning of the meetings. So it became a way for inclusion of non-English speakers as well. Participants can send text questions, such as the ones that you will send later on. And sometimes they can ask video questions. If we test their videos beforehand, they are able to send video questions, and everybody will hear them live at the IGF as well. And in every IGF room, there is an exhibition of the captioning and of the platform. So it creates a sense to the on-site participants. They see the platform with the list of remote participants. They see who is on. So it creates a sense of realizing that there are remote participants in the room as well. And this has proven to be psychologically important. So this is the layout of the platform. You are familiar with that. We use webcast with WebEx, sorry. It's the same platform that we use here for our meetings. It is a little bit customized for the needs of the IGF. So you see the webcast in the center, and below you see the real-time transcripts that people can follow while they watch the webcast. It makes it easier to follow the English discussions. To the right, you will see the list of participants, the chat feature, and below you see the image of the hubs that are connected. So the hubs, when we test their audio, like I said, they can make on video questions to the IGF participants. And this is how the room in the IGF actually looks like. So like I said, the computer that is on, you have the remote moderator, which is the person that is reading the questions that are being raised in the chat. And they take the microphone, they raise their hands, and they ask this question to all the IGF participants so they can answer. At the same time, the screen with this platform is shown in the room in the IGF, so people realize that the remote participants are connected. And people in the IGF can also see the live transcript. It makes it easier to follow the meetings, like I mentioned before. So this is the basic room layout that you see in workshops in the IGF. A very important aspect is to offer trainings and to communicate with hub organizers. Online trainings are offered to hub organizers and to the remote moderators. We found that the technological aspects, I mean the platform to make sure that everything is working fine, is an important aspect, but it's also very important to train the ones that will be the bridge between the hubs, the remote participants, and the on-site participants. So we have trained moderators to interact with the online participants and to forward their questions to the floor. And we train the hub organizers as well, so they have a smooth experience when they organize the hubs. We have this call for hub registration, and an important aspect is to give wide publicity and to rely on the expertise that non-governmental actors usually have for community building, for raising awareness. Sometimes if you are an organization and you just issue a call for hub registration, not much will happen. So it's important that you develop this dialogue, this open dialogue with non-governmental representatives that have this grassroots contacts with their communities, with their constituencies. So you make sure that the call is really widespread and that you raise awareness in these communities. So communication, how you publicize it, is very important. Creating partnerships with non-governmental actors, it's also very important. And of course, we offer individual support to each hub organizer. It's very important that they feel secure, that they have confidence in the technology, because sometimes they call the authorities of their countries. They call the Ministry of Telecommunications, they call government representatives, they call parliamentarians to go to the IGF hub, so they are on the spotlight, and sometimes they have this pressure that everything needs to work perfectly, that we totally understand. So individual support to these hub organizers is also very important. And of course, we offer support during the IGF through email, through Skype conversations, to make sure that we give a solution to any glitches that come out during the IGF as well. After the meeting, and we found this to be very important, this is something we introduced in 2009. The image is awful, I don't know what happened, but we usually make a survey so people can evaluate what they find about the webcast. Was the quality okay? Did you find any glitches? What did you think about the platform, the support? What are your suggestions for improvement? And little by little, with this feedback from e-participants, be the individual e-participants watching from home or participants from the IGF hubs, we have improved the mechanism over the years. So creating this feedback loop of the whole experience is also important to us. You see here a report that was written by the organizer of an IGF hub in Burundi. So we also encourage hub organizers to make a synthesis, a summary of what has been discussed in their national hubs. And we try to feed this synthesis into the international discussions. We collect all the synthesis, and this gives a good mapping of what were the issues that were mostly important in different regions. We have a regional map of issues of importance. And this is something that is useful for the organizers of the next meeting to take into account what were the regional and national concerns about the IGF and internet governance policy. So throughout the years, we have learned some lessons that I think are valuable to share. The first of them is openness of the process. Like I said, it's very important that the non-governmental actors are invited to participate and that they make these bridges with the local audience. So it's important to rely on them. We have also developed an open dialogue with the IGF Secretariat. This has been important. So we, as facilitators of creating eParticipation, we also had this liberty to work as well and to improve and to test new solutions. The human resources make all the difference. Like I said, it's very important to have a good platform, a good technical aspect in place. But if you don't train moderators, if you don't train remote participants, chances are that the glitches will be more significant. So it's very important to give this assistance to all people that are involved. And so the trainings are very important. And the audio quality, we found out that this should be our first priority. We are dealing with hubs that are organized in developing countries that sometimes don't have a good bandwidth. So if the audio is working fine, it's half of the way. Sometimes we have delays in image, but the quality of the audio, it's our first priority. And the introduction of captioning that, like I said, worked well, not only for people with hearing disabilities, but also for people that don't speak English as their native language. We have, of course, to face some challenges, and I'm going to briefly go through them. The first of them is that making eParticipation, put eParticipation in place does not necessarily mean openness in international organization processes. Sometimes e-participants can connect to the meeting, but many times, as you know, you have background documents that are not publicized online. And this also creates a tension between more openness, more transparency in the organization and e-participation. E-participants want to have access to the background documents so they can be prepared. So there is a tension there. Sometimes it's important also when you create e-participation to make movements towards more transparency and openness of international organizations, including the background documents. But we have come to realize that this is positive. It creates, it's not a bad tension, it's a good tension. It's a tension that makes, creates possibilities for the organizations to evolve as well, in terms of more transparency, in terms of a more streamlined process of making information available. The dynamics of interaction during the conference, of course, has to be carefully thought about. It's important that the moderators of the on-site sessions are well aware that they should ask if there are any remote participants wanting to make a question or take the floor. So it's a process of raising awareness and sensitivity of those that participate in the meetings as well. Language diversity is also an issue that we have faced. Many people don't have English as a first language, so sometimes some organizations have managed to transmit the audio translations, such as French and Spanish, but not all of them have managed to do so. So sometimes they have put in place, the hubs have put in place on-site translation, and this is something that needs to be coordinated as well. In order for e-participants to have an effective impact on discussions, there are some things that need to be taken into account. Sometimes it is important to have early surveys to shape the agenda of the meeting, so e-participants can participate not only on the day of the meeting, but also on the process of agenda setting that starts earlier. Preparatory meetings can be conducted online. So these e-participants can give inputs to the ones that are going to present as panelists in the IGF. And some sessions, and we had experience with that in the IGF, can be conducted online by remote participants, by hubs. So the panelists are not in the IGF. The panelists are actually in the hubs. They are in their own countries, and they are panelists in the IGF talking about the difficulties in their own regions to an international audience. So it's like we change the flow. They are not the remote participants anymore. They are the presenters. We have done that in the IGF, and this was positive. We did that a lot with parliamentarians that could not attend the IGF, but we found that their participation was very important to the process. So some parliamentarians were remote speakers, so to speak, in the IGF. Another challenge is the psychological effect. We know that when people are organized together in a room, they tend to form groups, and sometimes it creates a feeling of us and them. With the e-participants, this is not good. So this is something we need to work more to break the ice on the dynamics, so the e-participants don't become the ones over there the us and them dynamics. And we also came to realize that social networking is also a good way to participate. Sometimes, most of the times, remote participants are not only connected to the online platform, they are also connected through Skype with the ones that are present on the meeting. And this is something that makes corridor diplomacy, let's say like that, possible. Sometimes people say, okay, but the most important discussions do not take place in the sessions. They take place in the hallways when people stop for coffee break, when they start to discuss things that really matter and break deals and so on. And they argue that e-participants would be completely excluded from that, which is not wrong to say that, but in a way, e-participants have managed to bridge and participate on this on-site conversations through Skype, for instance. They connect with people from their constituencies, so they come to know what is being discussed in the background on the corridors, and they are able to give their inputs as well. And many times e-participants participate on lobbying in international meetings. They are resource people that write draft statements, for instance. Many times those that are on site are too busy negotiating and on corridor diplomacy, and they don't have much time to write statements, for instance, and those they are participating remotely are doing two things: following the meetings, but also giving input documents, writing statements, and so on. So they do have a role on lobbying in international meetings, on the political side as well. So this is something that we came to realize over the years, and it was very interesting as well to us. So that was it. This is my email. Please feel free to contact me. If you, of course, you can ask questions now. I will go to chat soon to see your questions. But if you have other questions later, please feel free to contact me. It will be a pleasure to talk to you and to answer your doubts or to discuss this topic more, because it's something that I've really seen it grow, and I'm really passionate about the topic. So that was it. Thank you. Now I'm going to the chat, and let me see what questions you have. Well, thank you. E-participation is more neutral and more modern, of course. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Telepresence is very demanding in terms of resources. You are totally right. It has many benefits, but in terms of resources, you have not only to have a very good technical team to manage the setting of telepresence, because a lot of elements matter when you're setting telepresence. It's not just buying the equipment, but you need to have a good lighting, you need to have a good location with good acoustic and so on. So there are a lot of elements involved. What I have heard from diplomats is that the ones that have put in place telepresence in some rooms in the embassy is usually the large ones, the ones that conduct a lot of meeting with the peers that are located in other locations. So yes, it is a good option indeed, but it is costly. That's why we try to present other platforms as well that are more affordable and that are effective, I might say. It's not the same as telepresence, but they are effective. And technology is evolving fast. This is something that we have realized. Very interesting, the idea of corridor diplomacy through Skype. It is. It was a concern that we had, but me as a non-governmental participant, even when I go to the meetings, when I attend the meetings, when I am on site, during the meetings I coordinate with my peers through Skype, so we don't have to wait for coffee break to start to coordinate. When coffee break starts, we already have our strategy. We know which people we should approach, with whom we should talk to. So it's something good not only for e-participants, I would say, but also to participants on site. This combination of platform, the use of Skype, the use of messages, is something that has improved our strategy in terms of intervention internationally. And of course, this can be used by diplomats. Sometimes you are on site and you need to communicate with capital, right? You need a document, you need a reference, for instance, that will help you to make your case in an international discussion. And Skype and other similar technologies allow that, allow for communication with capital, to communication with peers in other regions. So it has proven to be a good strategy to combine these different platforms. What do you think is the most cost-effective tool for e-participation in a low-tech environment? Well, it depends really on the size of the meeting. Like I said, if you are thinking about communication between agencies, there are platforms that can be used, like even Skype, if you are in a meeting, sometimes is a useful platform. If you are talking about e-participation in a larger meeting, then there are other platforms available, such as Illuminate, is the one that is mostly used in academic environments. We have WebEx, which is the one that we are using. We have been using this in the IGF, and it has proven to be quite effective because you can adjust the elements of the platform. Like I showed you, we have embedded the captioning under the webcast. So people can see the webcast and the captioning right here. So they are both together. This is something that we have done to customize the platform to our needs. So we found that WebEx is a good platform. But there are many different combinations that we can make. I participated in a Diplo webinar last week, and they put in place a very interesting combination of Google Hangout. So we were 6 discussants, 6 speakers that connected through Google Hangout, and the event was being streamed through the internet. So there was a live stream through a platform of live stream. There are many like that, and people could give inputs in the chat. So a moderator will follow the discussion in the chat and forward the questions to us that were connected through Hangout. So you see that there's a combination of 3 different platforms there: Google Hangout with the webcast of the meeting, with the chat that allows for the participation of e-participants. So sometimes it's not only one platform. What I mean is that combination of platforms can also make things effective as well. And Julia asked, is participation always possible? What about, for example, people who have the economic and technological possibility to use e-tools, but they can't because they live in a dictatorial state that controls communication? Maybe in such situation, there is a low level of both information and participation. Sure. Well, remote participation helps us overcome some difficulties people have to participate, but of course not all of them. And the difficulties that people have in countries that control communication and online transmission of data, they usually replicate online as well. So of course, until now, we didn't have any hub organized in China, for instance, to follow the IGF remotely. So yes, these difficulties, these political difficulties, they usually translate online. What I can say by experience is that some people in these countries, they use some technology such as VPN in order to mask their IP addresses. So the IP addresses look like they are based somewhere. So using this kind of technology of VPN, they can connect to platforms and services that otherwise it would be impossible. I say that because now my husband is in China for 1.5 years. He's living there, and we were worried about how we were going to communicate. And he bought an account in a VPN, and we are using normally Gmail and Facebook and Twitter. He's posting in his blog. So my feeling is that not in all countries is like that, but in some countries, the goal is more to control the information that people have access on the ground. I mean, take the case of China. You would not have information of Falun Gong or the incident on place Tiananmen, but if you want to access a platform and you are using one of the services, it is possible. I'm not saying it's something that is easy or is available for everybody, but if you are located in one of those countries, sometimes this kind of technology helps. But I totally agree with you. It's not perfect, and this lack of participation on national countries that control information usually translates to other environments as well. So yes, this is something true. Stefano, as I would be interested to know more details on how captioning is implemented. Is it, you're welcome, Julia. Is it automatic, and what is the quality of captions? It's not automatic. If I am not mistaken, this is something that the IGF Secretariat organizes. It's not with us. We just embed the captioning inside the platform. But as far as I know, they tried automatic captioning on the first year they put in place, but the results were not satisfactory. I don't know if it's something that is also about the topic that we are discussing. IG, Internet Governance Environment, as some of you may know, probably is the one international regime with more acronym and strange words, and people talk like that. So it was really difficult on the automatic captioning to capture these acronyms and to capture what people were talking about in an accurate manner. So they have put in place captioning that is done by people that sit in different rooms. They are experts on that. They have hired a company that has worked well. It's the same company this last 3 or 4 years. I don't remember the name of the company, but if you write me later on, I can pass you more details. And these people sit in the room. They are watching the discussions and they are capturing real time. So of course, it's not 100% perfect, but it's pretty much it. So the captioning is available to those not only in the room, we are discussing and we see the captioning going on, but also to those that are participating remotely. So it's how it works. And this is something that has been a consensus in the community that is very, very useful, not only to those with hearing disabilities, but to those that don't speak English as a first language. And sometimes you are in the room, you are talking to someone and following the captioning over there, so you are not missing everything on the discussion. So it's useful. It's really useful for the whole community, and this is something that has been introduced, and I think is in the IGF to stay forever because people think it's very useful. Well, we have no more questions. Do you have any other burning issues that you would like to raise? Like I said, this is a topic that I'm really passionate about. I like talking about this very much. We have developed concepts and studies about this in Diplo, but we have also developed a very hands-on approach into the process. We have seen it develop and grow. We have seen the benefits. It has brought also the shortcomings and the difficulties. So, Stefano, one last question. IGF is a very good example, but I wonder what is your perception of using e-participation in sectors not strictly related to ICT? Well, this is where I am working. So I always bring the example of the IGF, not only because it's the one that I have experienced and worked on, and also because of the hubs, because I think the hubs are a good way to combine both kinds of participation and discussion on-site and online. But this is something that is being put in place in other organizations as well. We recently had a very good meeting with people from UNDP, and they told us about their experience in putting in place e-participation. Not only e-participation, but social networking strategy. This is something that is becoming of concern to organizations as well, to have a voice on social networking. So many of them have developed a presence in Facebook and in Twitter, and during conferences they tweet about what is going on, trying to create a buzz online. But I know that some organizations have introduced strategies. WIPO, for instance, has started to webcast its meetings. As far as I knew, it was only webcasting. They did not create yet a feedback loop for interaction with remote participants. But it depends, I think, on the political sensitivity of the topics as well. Of course, people related to ICT, they come from this environment, so probably they are more open, they are more knowledgeable about these options. But as far as we know, we are developing studies to map where these experiences have been put in place, and there are in other UN agencies as well, in different levels of development, different levels of interaction, different levels of inclusion. But this is something that is beginning to gain ground and to gain traction inside of organizations. When we started talking about that in 2007, 2008, this theme was like a taboo, you know, country representative, no, we don't want to be webcast, we don't want our image online. And I think there were some concerns that were plausible in terms of how webcasts would impact on negotiations and on openness of country representatives to speak their minds and to say what they want to say. You know, there is an interplay between more transparency and negotiations, and the need that diplomacy sometimes have not of secrecy, but of being low profile and so on. But the fact is, in the organizations that webcast was indeed introduced, it didn't change much on the communication dynamics. Sometimes people even forget that it's being transmitted. And on the other hand, I think it has contributed a lot to the transparency in the organizations. It has contributed to the quality of feedback that people send into the process. I think international issues are issues of public importance. They are important to everybody. So I don't think it's a good idea to keep these issues among a petit comité. Much more legitimacy and strength, international strength to these themes on the agenda is gained if there is publicity, if there are people discussing about it, if you see movements on social networking and so on. So I think it is positive. Of course, you have to take into account sensitivities, and each organization has moved in its own pace, and I don't think it's bad. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. But yes, this is something that is evolving in other realms, not only in internet governance fields as well. Okay, so I don't see any more questions. I would like to thank you all very, very much for coming today. Thank you. Thank you for your presence, and we meet later. And write to me if you want. I'm willing to receive your comments and questions later on, if I can help you with anything as well. So thank you very much for coming. Bye-bye. Have a nice day. Thank you all.